Well, are you ready for another video? I've gotten up 4 times now. Forgot my tissue, forgot my drink, didn't have my hearing aids on. I'm not wearing shoes, but I'm never wearing shoes because I figure we aren't going to be focusing on my feet. Definitely not on my feet. Okay, this is Memorial Day weekend. A lot of things going to be going on this weekend. I've covered it year after year. Of course, I've had a reason for covering it because one of the losses in my family was my brother many years ago, and I never want to forget him. So I've decided this year I'll just get the shoebox of letters down. I'll read them again, and that'll take care of my Memorial Day and my memory of my brother. Now, if I start talking about it, I start crying, so you can just forget that. Got my little tissue ready, just in case. We don't want to talk about anything that's going to make me cry. So what I'm going to focus on today is something kind of silly in a way, but I was thinking about it and I thought, yeah, I'm going to talk about my high school reunions. Everybody get to have high school reunions. Mine didn't start until I'd been out of high school 15 years. Nobody bothered to put one together. Couldn't find anybody locally that was willing to work on a class reunion. So my friend Buddy and I got together. We'd gone all through school together. He's still living in the hometown. We said, we've got to have a class reunion. So by him living there, he was able to get an address list. Everybody in town knew him. He knew them. So it wasn't going to be hard for him to put together an address list. He gave me the address list, and I would send the letters telling them when and where. He would take care of the location for the reunion, the catering, various things that are necessary when you are going to have a class reunion. So that first one was in 1969. Now we move on up. You can still recognize your classmate then. You didn't have any trouble. You didn't have to ask what's your name or look at a name tag. Of course, you use those name tags religiously because they are a necessity. You do not want to make a mistake and act like you don't know who this person is that you went all through school with. Oh my gosh, you'd have to leave town. So anyway, Buddy and I worked together. I was the program chairman. I took care of all the fancy doings and the gift giving and all that stuff and recognitions, and he was the MC. Our first reunion, we invited one of our school principals to speak. We discovered that was a mistake. We'd never do that again. We'd never have a teacher come and speak at our class reunion. And that first reunion was at a place that's familiar to all of you, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken, right there in our hometown. So that's where we had our reunion, in the back of the restaurant. Time passes, we go from one place to another, a hotel. One year we had our reunion at the old high school. Now they had remodeled the high school, since we had been there, the reunion was going to be held in the basement. In the basement? That's where the restrooms were, the boys and girls restroom. Who wants to have a reunion in a dark, dingy basement? But they did remodel it, and it was now the cafeteria for the school. As time went by, you reached a point where you didn't recognize that classmate. Wasn't sure who it was. Most of the time when I went to the reunions, I sat at a table with 4 or 5 girls. These were girls either had no husband or their husband never would come to their class reunions with them. Now, of course, I was there as the gay divorcee, so I let everybody know that I was, yeah, they knew. So I didn't have to worry about the better half. So we're talking and at the table one year, and one of the girls had always been a very quiet, sweet girl, and she didn't talk much. And I felt like she was being left out of our conversation. And I turned to her. I thought, well, now what can I say? So I thought I'd ask her about her family. And I said, tell me about your husband. She looked at me square in the eyes and said, he's dead. Well, that took care of that conversation. What do you follow that with? Okay, I turned to the other girls and we all talked. So you don't want to make a mistake like that anymore, because sometimes it can be, uncomfortable. Just uncomfortable. Now we get older. As we get older, they combine 2 classes because they're starting to die off, and some of them just don't want to come to a class reunion. They live right in town. That always bothered me, that some of us would travel so far, and those living right in town wouldn't come to their own class reunion. Now, I don't know what they had against it. I think sometimes they're afraid people are going to look at them and judge them by how they look, whether they were successful. You know, when you're young, that's one of the main things. Has he become a success? Does he make a lot of money? You can't help but notice those things. Sometimes they just come right out and tell you. And, of course, I was there, an ordinary girl with a husband that flew the coop, left me with 2 kids, and I had to go to work. Well, what's so exciting about my life that I can get up and call myself a success? No, that's for sure I was no success. So the classes continued to go from 2 classes to 4 classes. We're getting old at that point. In fact, one of my favorite classmates, I sat at the table with him and the valedictorian. Yeah, she had not gained an ounce since high school. Now, that's just not fair for somebody to be so trim and small and never gain an ounce over all those years. I didn't like that part. And to continue to let you know she was the valedictorian of the class. Of course we knew that. And I can remember us sitting at the table, and she was talking about, we were in the 9th grade. Our English teacher was from North Carolina, and you knew it. She had that southern drawl. and we were studying the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. I hope they've done away with that part of the English world to where you don't have to go through that whole poem. It's a poem, but it's pages and pages long. There wasn't anything interesting about it except a bird get killed, you know. And I always remembered the Valedictorian memorized the whole thing. Why? Well, she got extra credit for it. Who needs extra credit when you're already the Valedictorian? She had memorized that whole thing. And all I could think was, I want to know the occasion when she gets to stand up and recite the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. I want to be there. So anyway, the only part I memorized was, you're going to remember this too, if you had to study the Ancient Mariner. And I can hear my English teacher quoting this now. Water, water, everywhere, and all the board did shrink. Water, water, everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Now, I don't have a southern accent, so I couldn't say it like she did, but I never forgot that, and that's how much I memorized. And this friend of mine memorized the whole darn thing. And I'm wondering, how many times has she had the occasion to get up before someone and make use of that poem? She even recited it. Not all of it, just part of it, to me at this one class reunion. I made fun of her a little bit. She didn't mind that. She's a good sport. We go on, and it reaches a point where our class reunion, one year, they had 10 classes, all big classes. Now, we had a new high school. This high school was pretty nice. It had nice restrooms. Ours was just little concrete walls and little cubby holes where you didn't have doors to the cubicles. So, we've reached the point that we're pointing across the room. Who is that? That's who? That can't be her. Boy, I'm glad you told me, because I never would have recognized her, and that would have been embarrassing if she expected me to know who she was. Of course, I just took for granted, since I was a little heavier than I had been in high school, weighed 103 pounds. Well, I still got that 103 pounds, but I added a few to it. We get to the part after we've had our dinner and everybody greeted each other, and we go into the high school auditorium where they have a stage and they have theater seats. Wow, they've really come a long way since I was in high school. So everybody's there. I don't know, there were at least 100 people all sitting in the audience. And I am on the next to the last row at the end of the row. So everybody gets up one at a time, every student, classmate. And let's just say, I'm going to just use names. I'm not referring to the real people. I'm just giving you a name. There's George. George stands up, and everybody's wearing name tags, you know. He stands up. My name is George so-and-so. This is my beautiful wife, Jenny. We have 3 wonderful children. My son just graduated from the University of so-and-so. He's going to be a lawyer. And they have 2 children, and they live in Washington, D.C. Now, I'm impressed. The next one gets up. My name is Jim Johnson. This is my beautiful and precious wife, Mary Ann. We have 6 children and 12 grandchildren. Woo! One after the other one. My name is Joanne. This is my wonderful husband. He's been faithful to me for 40 years. He has taken care of me and our wonderful children. He has been very successful in his own business. He has a used car a lot. Well, that's pretty good. So, it goes on and on and on. My name is, this is my wonderful, gorgeous wife. You get it? You getting it? We've got a lot of rows we have to go through before they get to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to tell these people? I've been divorced most of my life. I've got 2 kids. They haven't done anything special. I mean, they're just the normal, average kids. What am I going to tell these people about myself? Well, finally, they get to me. I stand up and I said, now listen carefully. I said, I'm not going to tell you my name because most of you have already said I haven't changed a bit since high school, which tell me you already knew who I was. So taking care of that. I'm a gay divorcee. Been that way since 10 years after my marriage, when my husband flew the coop and left me with the kids. Got a son and a daughter. Nothing special to tell about them. They're just normal kids. I'll tell you what. I'm going to tell you about my neighbors. You don't need to know about my family, my kids, and how successful they are. I want to tell you about my neighbors. Now, you know I live in Lexington. And first of all, I'm the lady here that drove up in that red car sitting out in the parking lot. The only red car that was in the parking lot. That's my car. I said, first, I'm going to tell you about a neighbor that most of you are familiar with. Now, this is because we lived in Kentucky. My neighbor is Carl Hurley. Woo! Oh, they all knew who I was talking about. Carl Hurley was a college professor who turned comedian. And he was well known in the state. I'd seen him perform several times. Very funny. Jeff Foxworthy, people like that. He would talk about his hometown, his raising, and everything he said was just hilarious. So anyway, they're impressed. I'm seeing they're impressed. Carl Hurley's my neighbor, and I've seen him perform, and I've talked to him several times. How many of them can say that? I said, now the second neighbor I'm going to tell you about is, I don't remember her name, but she was Miss Kentucky last year. She lived right below me. Pretty girl. Oh my gosh. She's like a celebrity. And Pat knows her. Now the third person I'm going to tell you about just lives 3 blocks up the street from me. And I know you're going to know who he is. He goes by the name of John Calipari. Well, the crowd practically stood. My gosh, John Calipari is her neighbor. Now, if you don't know who he is, you don't follow athletics. You don't follow basketball. You don't follow the University of Kentucky Wildcats. John Calipari was the coach for the Kentucky Wildcats. That's big stuff. That put me right up there at the top of the list. Ooh, look at her friends, her neighbors. Look who she knows. So I finished with my little speech. Didn't say a word about my kids. Didn't tell how successful they were or were not. And I didn't tell them what kind of job I had. All they needed to know was I was driving that red car out there in that parking lot. Well, we finished and the crowd broke up. And one of the girls in the group hadn't seen her since high school, which was, at that time, 45 years at least. And she was one of the smartest girls in school. I had even picked up a book in a Hallmark shop, a book of poetry, and I looked at the name of the person who had written it, and it was that girl standing there talking to me. I knew she was smart in high school because she used to help me write my assignments in class. I'd forget, and I'd say, will you help me write it? Well, she would write it, and then I would copy it. While she's writing, I'm copying it. So I had my class assignment for the day. Well, you know, teachers recognize students' writing. They recognize their handwriting. That's why I had to copy it. And there's no doubt she knew I didn't write that story. But this girl stands there and she looks at me and she said, I think you need to take your show on the road. She thought I was so funny. Well, my brother was there. I didn't see him laugh. He didn't give a big smile at what I had to say. I'm not sure he approved. But anyway, I haven't been to a class reunion since then. They've died out. So many classmates have passed on. And Buddy, who was the MC at every class reunion that he and I went to, he passed on about 2.5 years ago. And I used to say, Buddy, I think you and I are going to be the last two to go. Well, Buddy's already gone. I'm still here. But I remember him. I remember him well. He was a funny character. And he supported the high school his whole life, everything that they did. But I just thought, you know, you just need something a little different. It's not really a story about anything special. It's just something I remembered and something I got a kick out of. And I got to laugh about it after it was over. Especially when this young, smart lady said, You need to take your show on the road. That was a compliment. Wouldn't you think so? So, that has to do with high school class reunions. I hope everyone is playing safe this weekend for Memorial Day. If they have to travel the interstate, it's a busy, busy place. And I hope they get to meet with family and friends that they haven't seen for a long time. That's life, folks. And I hope I hear from you. I keep getting wonderful comments from you. And I think my sisters are getting a little bit jealous because of the compliments I get. I don't think they ever thought I could have a YouTube channel. Well, I didn't think so either. But here I am. I've just passed the 8,000 mark for subscribers, and I'm aiming for 10,000. You're going to help me, aren't you? Thanks so much for listening to me today, and you take care.